Hello and welcome to AgriFocus, the podcast from Agriland that looks in depth at some of the topical issues of the day. I'm Stella Meehan and I'm joined today by Dr. Frank Harrington, who is chair of the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland Rural Agency Committee and is also discipline lead of Real Estate and Valuations at TU Dublin. We're going to discuss land prices, whether that's land purchases and indeed rental or leases. This past week, auctioneers and valuers with the Society of Chartered Surveyors of Ireland, that's the SCSI, said that the outlook for the agricultural land market remains strong for 2025, and they're forecasting that the price of agricultural land nationally will increase by 6% on average this year. In a major new report with Teagasc, auctioneer and valuer members of SCSI operating in the agricultural sales and rental market say average rental prices in 2025 are also expected to increase by as much as 7%. So there are different areas of the country where these prices have been experienced over the past 12 months since the previous report. But the average price of non-residential agricultural land in 2024 was €9,900 an acre, which is an increase of 7%, up from €9,297 in 2023. So let's look into the detail a little more here now with Dr. Frank Harrington. Firstly, Frank, can you tell us about the average price of agricultural land, which was non-residential last year? What parts of the country are seeing the best and worst prices?
So you've highlighted the main findings of the report there very well, Stella. There's obviously regional variances across the country, and even within, we've broken it down on a county-by-county basis, but even on a county-by-county basis, you will see where good quality land and poor quality land are selling for different areas, different prices. So if you look in our report this year, we've seen growth in Waterford, which has recorded the highest price per acre on good quality land, with about 23,000 an acre for good quality land. And then in the on the lower side of things, poor quality land in Mayo was selling for in and around 3,000 an acre, depending on the size of parcel.
That's a significant difference there. I suppose not particularly a surprise to many. I mean, you would expect the land in Waterford and certainly down the south to be quite good, and obviously more marginal land than in the likes of Mayo, the west and northwest and so on. But what do you think, and I suppose that what do the valuers in the Society of Chartered Surveyors and Valuers, what do they think is driving this land price increase?
On a broader scale, the report finds that a lot of the buyers are coming from the dairy sector, and the dairy sector, as your listeners I'm sure would know, has been performing well last year and has a strong first quarter this year. So they're one of the major drivers on the demand side of things. On the supply side of things, there's a low level of land coming to the market. It's nothing new. We've seen some increases, but in a broad level, if you look at the trends over the last number of years, we have about 0.6% of land, of all non-residential agricultural land coming onto the market each year, and that's a very low level of supply. And I think the demand, the strong sector performances combined with the low supply is really driving the overall trend. And that's why our forecasts are reasonably strong for 2025 with a number of caveats.
And I suppose to explain to our listeners who maybe are not in the dairy sector themselves, the reason probably the dairy sector is driving it is obviously the dairy sector has been performing well over the last year. Milk price has been good, but also restrictions in terms of legislation coming from Europe in terms of the likes of the nitrates regulations requiring dairy farmers, I suppose, in terms of their stocking rates, which means that if they want to continue farming at the level that they have been thus far, they'll need that extra land. So that's obviously, Frank, where kind of a lot of the dairy demand is coming from.
Yes, so you've highlighted the two factors there. So just maybe starting off with the first factor about the pricing for the outputs from the dairy sector. It's important to highlight with this report that what this report is, as you've said, is a survey of rural practice members who are active across the country, chartered rural practice surveyors. But it also combines those insights with the data from Teagasc and their farm income survey. So we're looking at the actual underlying drivers of input and output for the various sectors, and looking at the margins that are available there and what are the likely trends in that sector. So on that side of the dairy sector, milk prices have been performing well, and some of the input costs have been going down as well. So the margins are up. So that's driving that. On the other side of things, you've highlighted the nitrates piece, and because of the new environmental rules, a lot of dairy farmers and farmers are looking at getting more land for to meet those requirements. So that puts additional pressure on the demand side by the requirement for more land.
Then in terms of the land rental market, the trend is similar in that there's an estimated increase for rental prices this year for agricultural land. So again, would it be the same areas that would be, commanding those kind of prices, those increased prices, the good quality land in the southeast versus maybe the poorer quality land in the northwest?
Yes, it would broadly. One of the trends that came out on the rental market was the particular push for long-term leasing, and I suppose the security that provides. So it probably linked to the low level of land mobility and low level of land coming onto the market, and these new environmental rules where people need to have more land quickly and there's not enough land to buy. So they want to secure land, on the rental market that they can actually do, and they're prepared to pay a premium on long-term leasing relative to con-acre or traditional con-acre agreements.
Yeah, so leasing and land rental is obviously a vital part of the agricultural sector as well. It's very important, as you said there, for viability of future enterprises, for expansion, and with the low level of supply coming onto the market, it's even more important that they get, those really long-term lease agreements or rental agreements, whatever they may be. And as you said, they'll pay a premium because the supply and demand is there, I guess.
Yeah. They will pay a premium for that long-term agreement. They just want the land and they require the land based on the demand. And they'll pay that premium as well because I suppose with traditional con-acre agreements, they're only 11 months. It's very hard to make investments in that land if you only know you have it for 11 months, although many of them roll on. So I suppose if you have a longer term security of tenure with it, you can at least place more investment in the land and have more security with that, of acquiring the land.
And then, Frank, I suppose something that also is featured in the report and what you've said ties into it in terms of generational renewal, succession, ensuring longevity of a farming enterprise, whether it's through an inheritance or a long-term lease situation. We can't talk about land in Ireland without talking about succession and generation renewal. And a feature of the report is, I suppose, about how important it is to ensure generational renewal. And that maybe there's a piece there for the government to get involved in terms of incentivising, because sometimes it is something, succession sometimes is something that farmers put off and they put it on the long finger if they're trying to put in place a succession plan. So it can make maybe younger generations find it more challenging to plan in advance and make future plans. But also some people just leave it until the last minute. They're not prepared. But is there something more that can be done here to ensure more generational renewal in this country?
Yes, I believe so. I understand that the government have commissioned a commission to investigate this and are putting together a report that should be out later in the year. And I'm eagerly awaiting the outcomes of that. We have a special feature in this edition which highlight the complexities of it and the various different components that need to be addressed. From our side, I suppose, with an agent's hat on, one of the issues that is coming through from the survey is just the lack of supply, into the market in terms of sales. And that's from a generational renewal perspective, but the land mobility issue within that. And when I talk about land mobility, I'm thinking about land coming to the market and the opportunities for new farmers, young farmers to actually, who maybe aren't from a traditional farming background, to actually get into farming. And there's various different partnerships and other ways, but we do think that there could be something done in terms of incentivizing and getting more land onto the market to address what the CSO are showing and ourselves are showing about the low land mobility in the country, to try and encourage more land and give those opportunities for young farmers and for to get and encourage that generational and succession. So we're actually undertaking a working group has been established following the report has no recommendations per se into that, but we have commissioned a working group who are doing ongoing research into that, and hope to have a report out later in the year as well. And we would be happy to talk to you about that when the time comes.
It'd be something very much of interest to most people in the agri sector, because in Ireland as an island, we've a finite amount of land. What we have is what we have. We can't create any more. And as you said there, with the supply not coming onto the market now, it's important. Even with an inheritance, if a younger farmer in a family knows that they may be inheriting from their parents at some stage, or the land to be handed over, with the new regulations and the new demands, the land that they may even inherit may no longer be enough. For example, if they're in dairying and they want to retain a nitrates derogation, for example. So when we talk about land and we talk about, I suppose, the real estate that is land, where are predominantly most of the properties or the land coming from onto the market now? Where are the most land sales? Is it from, I suppose, an estate where someone has become deceased with no one to take over and so on, or people getting out of agriculture? Do you hear anything from fellow colleagues in the SCSI about that?
Well, the report does highlight that the majority of sales are coming from probate sales. So it is in that context that the majority of land coming to the market is coming from that probate side of things. So there's very limited amount of stock coming onto the market where people just choose to sell if they're retiring. It's usually intergenerational transfers, and probate happens when people there's maybe no one in the family who wants to take it on, and it goes down through that way.
It is, I suppose, not a huge amount. A lot of the time, farming families will continue it on, as you said. Sometimes from time to time, that's when it comes to the market, when maybe there isn't a next generation to take on the farming enterprise. If you are a listener now who is trying to secure land this year, extra land, be it rental, I'd say they probably ideally, maybe if they're in the dairy sector, want to buy, but sometimes you won't have that option and you might just have to lease, and they're getting a little concerned now. So we'll look at the buyer aspect first. What would be the advice to them? Where should they go, or what can they do?
In terms of looking for land, I would advise them to go and talk to the local agents in the country. The Chartered Rural Practice Surveyors who are contributed to this report have huge expertise in that area, and they will know the local knowledge as well in terms of what might be coming up on the market in terms of rentals. So I would encourage them to talk to their local agents, to see what might be available for them.
And similarly, I suppose if you have land that you don't want anymore, or maybe that you inherited and never did anything with and so on, not probate, we'll say, just if you wanted to, again, to contact your local agent, really, because they will have the local knowledge, and they may already have clients in who are actually looking for land. So there could be some sort of a link up there. In all local rural towns and villages, you'll have usually a local agent, and they can provide that link between the two. Maybe if a farmer or a landowner doesn't know where to go next and they actually do want to organise some sort of long-term lease or something like that.
Yes, and it is important to get that advice and to talk to the local agent about the options there for them, whether it's a conacre or a short-term lease or a long-term lease, depending on what their actual priorities are, because there is tax structures that may be beneficial to them, but that also comes with security of tenure, and they don't have access to the land for that period of the rental agreement. So it's important to talk to the agent and make a plan for what your priorities are.
And this report is obviously in conjunction with Teagasc, and they are given their outlook for, for more the commodity side of it, or the sector side of it, be it tillage, dairy. As we know, milk price and lamb, for example, did very well in 2024. Are we looking like that will continue again based on the research from Teagasc going into 2025 and even into 2026, Frank?
I suppose my colleagues in Teagasc would be best placed to speak about it, but from my engagement with them, it looks like Q1 2025 sees a continuation of strong performance in most sectors, with dairy being the most significant growth. But broadly, it looks like all sectors are likely to continue in the commodity prices. Now, there are a lot of challenges out there in the market, whether it's talking about Trump's tariffs or various different things that may present volatility. But right now, as we speak today, the outlook seems quite positive.
And finally, Frank, in terms of the valuation of farmland in this country going forward, and I suppose there have been a number of reports now over the last few years and trends and so on. Is it likely to continue in an overall sense that the value of farmland in Ireland, whether it's for purchasing or for rental, will continue to increase? Is the supply going to continue to get less and less and the demand more so?
There certainly is no indication that supply is going to increase in any time soon, and that is going to keep pressure on prices. And if you look on the demand side of things, the underlying factors that are driving demand from the traditional agri side of things, in terms of input, in terms of margins, and that, as I say, are quite strong. We're showing a forecast of 6% increase in land prices for 2025. And last year in our report, we also forecast 6%, and it turned out to be 6%. So, the trends, it does seem to be continuing for increases in the shorter term. In the medium term, it's really hard to speak about that. It will be dependent on how much land comes onto the market and all those underlying factors. And you do have, outside of the traditional buyers of land, the traditional farmers, you have got the recreational farmers as well, and institutional buyers who are buying land, and there is other people in the market as well for land, to buy land to meet their sustainability rules, whether it's from a forestry perspective or renewables. So the underlying drivers are there that land is probably going to continue on that trajectory. But it's hard to. Our forecast certainly is 6%, and it looks like it'll continue that way in 2025 anyway.
Certainly this year anyways, if last year was any indication to go on. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of AgriFocus. Thank you once again to our guest today, Dr. Frank Harrington, Chair of the SCSI Rural Agency Committee and also of TU Dublin. We hope you found this podcast informative and interesting. Please rate and review the podcast on any platform that you listen to it, and do share it with anyone you think might be interested. Until next time, goodbye and take care.